Hi everyone, welcome to Geekgasm TV. My name is Gray and today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV. Whether it's in a bit of a death spiral. Is this the beginning of the end for an MMO that I've been playing for 6 years, since 2019 I think. I joined and started playing properly just before Shadowbringers released, so I got to play through A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, Stormblood, and Shadowbringers all in one big hit, and I adored it. And there was so much else to the video game to discover after I'd finished playing Shadowbringers, and I really adored Endwalker. I know for some it kind of divided opinion. Not everybody liked the introduction of Meteon in that main story, but I really, really enjoyed it. And then we had our kind of 2.5 year wait for Dawn Trail to launch, and Dawn Trail was a disappointment story-wise. I think a huge chunk really of the player base felt that, and that's okay in most MMOs. I think as long as the content is good and there's plenty of it to play, players don't seem to mind. But when your MMO is so structured around the quality of the story, and then that doesn't land, it has a big impact. So I don't know about you, if you play 14, if you're like me, you're really invested in your main character. They are a big part of your gaming life. And my main character, Nilfarium, she's the Warrior of Light. And the Dawn Trail story shifted the focus away from her, away from the Warrior of Light, and put it onto a new character called Wook Lamat. And Wook was not the greatest character of all time. So I want to just get into a bit of a deep dive around where we're at with 14 currently, and why Dawn Trail specifically has meant that huge chunks of the player base are cancelling their subscriptions. One of the biggest challenges that 14 has is that it's now kind of quite an old game. It originally launched in 2014 in its current form, and although it gets incremental updates on a fairly regular basis, so when Dawn Trail launched, for example, we got a graphics update which was really welcomed, that hasn't necessarily shifted the dial really. So as you can see, just looking at this cutscene, which is the first cutscene you get at the beginning of Dawn Trail, character movements are kind of a bit stiff. The characters are not really moving in a natural way, and when you give your game a bit of a graphics overhaul, which they did, and it does look better, environments are better than they used to be, but the character movements look almost even less natural. So characters start to look a little bit like puppets or marionettes, something along those kind of lines. So it starts to lose some of its sense of realness, I guess. And you know, 14 has always had that as a bit of a problem, but it's actually exacerbated because the game looks better. But like I said, the game has always had that as a bit of an issue. The character models in cutscenes don't look great. I think there's something great about the fact that your character, as you can see, there she is in those cutscenes wearing what you've got them wearing. That's all fantastic. I love that stuff. But the big challenge is that if your story doesn't match up, that stuff starts to become a bit more of an irritation and starts to grate. Shadowbringers and Endwalker, on the other hand, delivered brilliant storytelling. Shadowbringers in particular is lauded right the way through the Final Fantasy community as having really delivered a brilliant piece of content. I would argue that between them, Shadowbringers and Endwalker, they are probably the best piece of Final Fantasy we have had since Final Fantasy X. They truly deliver a compelling piece of storytelling where you genuinely believe the characters in the video game are at risk. And maybe the misstep was that actually, despite all that risk that the main characters got put through, we didn't actually lose anyone. Historically, Final Fantasy XIV has been quite good at getting rid of characters, or killing characters off, I should probably put it as, that we've cared about on our journey as the Warrior of Light. Because we broadly hadn't lost anyone by the end of Endwalker, I think players went into Dawn Trail really confident that everybody would survive. The sense of any risk was gone. I'm pretty sure the development team of 14 won't be deaf to the commentary that's going on around the game right now. Plenty of content creators have already been ahead of the game, ahead of me in terms of making content, criticizing where the game is right now or talking about what they think is missing. I think one of the most interesting things is that the development team are probably sat there thinking, we aren't really doing anything that's very different from anything we've done before. Our cadence of releasing stuff is pretty similar to what we did in the past throughout Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Endwalker. And it's broadly similar kinds of content. It's not different from what we've had. But I think people's expectations have changed, and people's hunger to have content that will last them throughout an expansion is definitely higher than it used to be. And people want to play the game, but they want to be doing stuff that feels meaningful. And one of the challenges that 14 is facing is that it continues to release stuff that doesn't feel like it's really worth playing over and over again. So the Criterion dungeons, which were introduced during the Endwalker cycle, they were not worth doing more than once. So once you had completed them, there was no replayability to it. We also had, at the back end of Endwalker, the relic grind, except it wasn't a grind at all, which was deeply frustrating. And although that's been sort of addressed with the Dawntrail relic, even that hasn't really landed well with the community because it's just get it for one class and then you can buy the rest with tomes. Again, a missed opportunity. And I'm sure there will be others that will agree, even that has been made more casual. And I get it. I get why you might want to do that so that it gives more people the opportunity to get the relics. But actually what you're really doing is selling short your hardcore core community that really love the game and want reasons to play it. And that's really frustrating and disappointing to see. During the high points of Shadowbringers and Endwalker, it really felt like 14 was riding a bit of a crest of a wave. But now they remind me of a Premier League football team that won the Premier League, but then didn't invest in their team. So I start to wonder whether some of the responsibility for what's happened to 14 kind of sits with Square Enix rather than with the development team of the game. And the reason I say that is because actually there was this brilliant opportunity to invest more in 14, create more opportunity for 14 to grow in new ways. It feels like we could have had some really great side content or even some sort of mid-core dungeon experience that was a balance between normal dungeons and hardcore raiding, which I think the Criterion dungeons were trying to bridge but really didn't because, like I said, they didn't have that replayability factor, which is such a shame. It feels like Square Enix use 14 as a bit of a cash cow to finance the rest of their operation. And you start to wonder what happens if 14 truly starts to fail. Is there a plan B? Is there something else in the works? Are they working on what a successor might look like? What is the next iteration of an MMO set in the Final Fantasy universe? There's so much I still love about the game. I love crafting, gathering. I love the fact that I can effectively just sit and grind out content for hours, and there's kind of a weird pleasure in doing all of that. I love my main character. I'd love to see where Square Enix take this storyline next in 8.0, but I feel like so much is now riding on what that next expansion brings, and I'm not entirely convinced that 14 has it in the locker to deliver that now. The best example I can give, I think, is that when I stopped Savage raiding, probably about 2 months ago, I kind of just stopped playing the game. And I logged in this morning to record some of the footage that you're seeing now. And I still haven't done the next bit of story content that released 2 weeks ago with patch 7.3. And let me be clear, like that's unheard of for me. I am normally there day one, as soon as the patch releases, and that evening I will have completed that piece of story content because I'm really hungry for what it's going to tell me, where it's going to show the game heading next. And this time around, my excitement is just not there. The core content of 14 are its dungeons, and they can be brilliant fun and really enjoyable. But one of the things that I've started to grow more and more frustrated by is that they always follow the same pattern. So you pull two mobs together, you beat them, a piece of wall or something along those lines collapses, you go and pull another 2 mobs, defeat them, and then you hit a boss. And then that repeats 3 times until the dungeon is clear. I feel like it might be time to shake up that format. And I know there's been a couple of times, I think, throughout the Dawn Trail expansion where they have introduced a couple of different elements to that, like a kind of mini boss in one of them. They don't really work in any way that's different from what's happened in the past. And it would be really great, I think, to see that formula being messed with. I also think they could really do with messing with the content delivery piece. Now, while I understand that it's pretty important, I think, for people's schedules that the Savage raiding kind of stays on track with when people are expecting things to be released so that they can be available to do world first races, etc., etc. I do think when it comes to the patch cycles more broadly, they could mess with it so that there are more surprises. We hear so much about what's coming before it arrives, so none of it's a massive shock. So all you get is this sort of sense of anticipation of being able to do the thing you've already seen yourself, rather than opening up the game on the day of a patch release, not really knowing what to expect. And that element of surprise is missing with an MMO, and I do wonder whether there might be some value in the developers of 14 and in Yoshi P really being thoughtful about what does the next expansion look like, and whether there is an opportunity to just create a sense of anticipation about what might be coming rather than what is coming. Is 14 at risk right now? Not in the immediate future, probably not. But declines like it's currently going through are hard to arrest. You've got content creators who've played the game for years, either playing other stuff or becoming more like variety streamers or just not playing the game at all. You've got your audience criticizing the game really openly on social media in a way that they didn't previously. And there's this sense that Square Enix might not really be listening because they don't necessarily see it as particularly helpful, or they just think, oh well, the Final Fantasy XIV community will continue to pay their subscriptions and give us money, and that's what 14 is really there for us for. It's a cash cow. It's the thing that brings in the rent, if you like. And my fear for Square Enix is that that's a misplaced bet, because gamers are fickle. We saw that with the way players moved in droves to 14 from World of Warcraft during the Shadowbringers Endwalker phase. We saw content creators who were traditionally playing WoW move across to 14. The same thing can happen again, either with a different game or maybe back to WoW. That's the big risk for me, that players just move somewhere else and they don't come back. For me, a great news story in 8.0 might be enough to turn things around. But I do think that there is so much that the game could do to make itself more accessible to new players that it currently doesn't. If you start playing the game now, you've got hundreds of hours of content to get through to get to a place where you might be able to play alongside your friends who've been playing it for the last 10 years. That feels like it needs to be addressed. And there's so much that could be done to just change the way the game is delivered to its customers. Do I think it's savable? Yes, I do. Am I confident that Square Enix is prepared to invest in 14 to make that happen? No, I'm not. And that leaves me fearful for the future of 14. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please consider pressing like if you have done, or maybe even the subscribe button. I plan to make much more content over the next 7 months or so. But yeah, thanks very much for your time. I hope you feel like it's been well spent, and I'll see you next time.